Humans are time travelers. We jump so often from the past to a possible future and back to the past again that it can be hard to truly experience the present. How can we connect to now? The Connected Universe. Now on Vimeo.
Are you ready to take your health and wellness career to the next level? Have you always dreamed of having a career in natural medicine? Do you need to expand and protect your professional health practice with proper credentials? Then take the next step and start an exciting, successful and meaningful career by enrolling in an online degree program in natural and integrative medicine at Quantum University.
Hello everyone, this is Nassim Haramein from the Resonance Science Foundation talking about some of the most exciting new physics emerging in the world today. There's been a lot of changes that are occurring in quantum theory, quantum mechanics, and quantum field theory. In the last few years, there's big changes that are on their way. One of them being the Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment. I happen to disagree with that interpretation. Everybody knows that. I've been pretty vocal about it for the last 30 years. And the reason I disagree with it, so did Einstein, is that literally, as Einstein, I don't think the universe is playing dice and that everything is based on random functions. And that statistical analysis of the wave function of a collapse is an appropriate way to describe the creation of our reality. I just want to make that more clear. The current Copenhagen interpretation says that when there's a measurement, and this is something that has to be clarified especially for the non-technical mainstream population, including the spiritual community, and practitioners out there, there is absolutely nothing, unlike some of the promotion that's being done by others, in the Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment, in the standard interpretation of the double slit experiment in quantum physics, that says anything about consciousness. It just says that a measurement is done, and when a measurement is done, then there's a collapse of the state of superposition of the waveform into its final state. Now, the measurement doesn't involve consciousness. It can be a probe attached to a computer with nobody looking at the computer. It doesn't need to be a person. It certainly has nothing to do with a person, because quantum mechanics as it is right now, as formulated right now, or relativity, as formulated right now, doesn't predict anything to do with a human being. That is, no biology emerged from either of these theories, because both these theories are based on the concept that the universe is generally random. And under random function, not even one little microbe can come to exist. In fact, in the latest paper we published, where actually my first paper in biophysics, written with Dr. Amira Valbaker and William Brown, our biophysicist on staff, we calculate the probability of some of the most simple, the most basic interaction to occur under random function to produce a basic biological structure such as a monocellular structure, some of the most simpler biological entities. And the calculation is remarkable. Under random function, the probability of these things, you know, of by some miracle, these things just coming together to create biology or life, never mind the complexity of a human being, just monocellular life, is very low. And it's not just very low, the probabilities are almost impossible to find, meaning, you know, they're not present, meaning, so when we do the calculation, the answer is within the realm of 1 to 1 to 1 to 10 to the 8,800 and something, which is a huge number. This is a 10 with 8,000 zeros behind it. To give you an idea, because some people are not familiar with exponents, and that, you know, to give you an example, for instance, the radius of the universe. You know, the universe is extremely large. You know, a solar system is large. A galaxy is very large. The universe is very, very, very large. The radius of the universe is typically measured in centimeters. So a centimeter is really small. So you can imagine that there's a lot of centimeters in the radius of the universe, right? Well, the radius of the universe is in the range of 10 to the 28 centimeters. So that's 10 with to the power of the 28. Now, when we're talking about probabilities that exceed 10 to the 8,000, we're talking about an extremely large number. So the probabilities of life coming together just as a result of random function is almost nil. And quantum physics is based on probability functions that are based on the assumption that the universe is random. And the Copenhagen interpretation really only says that when a measurement is done, there's a different result in the double slit experiment than if there is no measuring instrument there. And that has been misinterpreted by many as saying that consciousness must be present in order to have, you know, for the quantum collapse of the waveform to occur. And that's incorrect. And that's why the mainstream is not really agreeing with that or paying attention to that. Now, is it true that a particle is a particle and a wave at the same time and it cannot be visualized as it is in the Copenhagen interpretation? Is it true that if a cat is in a box, the typical interpretation of the Schrodinger's equation, which describes a cat in a box with a poison and a hammer that's on some kind of random function so that you don't know if the hammer has hit the vial and killed the cat by liberating the poison or not. And the typical analogy is said that if the cat is in the box and the box hasn't been, the state of the cat hasn't been observed or hasn't been measured, the cat is in state of superposition. It is both alive and dead at the same time. This is a remarkable interpretation in physics. And of course, Einstein didn't think it was true. He's known for having asked a famous physicist at one point, do you really believe that if you're not looking at the moon, it's not there? The cat is in superposition until the box is open and the measurement is made, and then the cat collapses into its final state, either alive or dead, in a completely random function. The problem with that is the assumption that because the cat is in the box, it's isolated from the universe. And of course not. It's not because the cat is in the box that the universe is confused about the state of the cat. Now, the human on the outside might be confused about the state of the cat, or the human equipment on the outside might be confused about the state of the cat. But gravitational fields, electromagnetic fields are all going through that box, and it doesn't matter how well it's insulated, if it's a Faraday cage or not, and so on. And so, you know, there's a misinterpretation there. And then what about the observation of the flea on the cat? What, does not matter with the universe? What about the microbes that are inside the box? Those are frames of observation that could collapse the quantum waveform. In quantum physics, that's called a fractional problem. It was mentioned in a very in a recent paper from a very famous physicist, that there's a fundamental problem with this interpretation of quantum theory, and it really is a way that almost 100 years ago, kind of quantum physics took a completely different path, a path in which nothing could be visualized, in which the only physics that could be written at the quantum level were really statistical analysis, probability curves, and the position of everything, or its velocity, its direction, could not be found. And so there is a new interpretation. I mean, it's not actually that new. De Broglie and Bohm, early on, realized that there was a second option to the interpretation of the double-slit experiment. That is, that instead of seeing that the particle is some kind of entity that's moving in a field-free environment, and of course, then if it goes through one slit and you're getting an interference pattern coming from the other slit, you think that somehow the particle was in a state of superposition, it went through both slits at the same time and interfere with itself, then it gets really esoteric and really out there and actually not realistic at all. This quantum weirdness thing, the universe is clearly, very organized and is not seem to be at the larger scale resulting of some quantum weirdness. How is it that it organizes at larger scale if it's made of quantum entities? Well, there's another alternative, and I think that one is much more plausible, and that is that the particle is actually moving in a field. And that field is interacting with the particle. In fact, from the physics I've written, the particle itself that's going through the slit is made of the field. You can think of the particle as a little vortex in that field. And I think that's very relevant to all you practitioners working with the subtle energy of the body. In any case, of course, when the particle moves through the field, it makes waves. And if the field has waves in it as well, it will guide the particle in a certain way. And the wave moving in the field, interaction with the field, will produce very specific effects. So de Broglie and Bohm solved these equations, but because the earlier Copenhagen interpretation had taken root, nobody really paid attention until actually fairly recently, where a French physicist and then eventually MIT basically took a back of fluid, in this case silicone fluid, put little silicone beads on it, oscillated the back of silicone fluid to simulate the oscillation of a field, and then shot the little beads of silicone at two slits. And they got all the same results as you get from the double slit experiments, including quantum tunneling and all the interpretation that were done by the Copenhagen meetings were able to be reproduced just with fluid dynamics and beads, showing that actually there's a classical fluid dynamic explanation to the double slit experiment. And of course, if you put a probe in there, if you put a measurement instrument, if you put anything in there in the field, in this case in the back of fluid, that interferes with the waves that the particle is making, of course you're going to get a different result, and you're going to think that the observer has changed the result of the experiment. But in this case, it's basically that everything in the experiment, anything you add to the experiment, anything that's in the experiment is interacting with a field that connects all the parts. And so, of course, if you add things to the field, it's going to change the result. And I think that has a lot more wisdom to it. And, this is called pilot wave theory, the Broglie-Bohm theorem, and it's gaining momentum because the experiments are showing very clearly that all the results of the double slit experiment can be interpreted in fluid dynamics, in field dynamics. And I think this is actually very important for us. A lot of what we do in subtle energy work has to do with this, this interpretation that there is a field that our body is interacting with. In ancient time, most ancient civilization talked about that field. It was called chi or prana or mana or many different things, but it was all describing a field of information, a field of energy that connects everything, that's around everything, that's in everything, and that you can affect that field. And so I think that actually, although it might be disappointing for people, that we can't tag on consciousness on the standard Copenhagen interpretation, I think it's really exciting that now pilot wave theory, that's becoming more and more popular in physics, is actually giving us a much more clear picture of why practitioners are able to affect particle in their vicinity or even at the distance by interacting with a fundamental field that is present, and that has been, it used to be there prior to Einstein. It was called the ether. When Einstein field equations were rendered, they felt like they could get rid of the ether. Einstein at the time kind of agreed, but eventually came back around in his later years and said, my equations are invalid without an ether. The ether medium was this field that was thought to be everywhere in the space that carried the electromagnetic fields, that carried the electromagnetic spectrum, the light spectrum. Now this field is coming back, and it's coming back in a more understandable way, meaning that we have better details on how it functions, what it does. Certainly my equations show that this field, which is present in quantum theory, is called a vacuum fluctuation. It's present in the very specific part of quantum theory called quantum field theory, which when quantum field theory and the Dirac equations were rendered, showing that there is at the very fine level, way smaller than the nuclei of an atom, there is oscillations in the structure of space-time, electromagnetic oscillations that are significant. And that, we should pay attention to those. So basically, it's that field has been there, whether we like it or not, throughout the ages. It's just not been understood, and it certainly has not been understood as the foundation of the material world. So now, eventually, you get to the equations I've been writing, and all of a sudden you see that these little Planck oscillators, so that's how they're called, because the field that we're talking about is oscillating at the Planck scale. The Planck scale is very, very, very fine. It's way, way smaller than the material world, like even the nuclei of an atom. So let me try to give you some kind of idea of scale. Well, let's start with your body. Your body is made out of about 100 trillion cells. That has a lot of cells, right? So cells are already small because there's about 100 trillion in your body. They're all functioning perfectly. There's cell divisions occurring, millions of cells dividing every minute. There's billions of chemical changes occurring every second for you to be alive, right? So all these processes, it's highly complex, and the stuff is really fine, right? Cells are already fine. Well, a cell is made out of approximately 100 trillion atoms. So that's how small atoms are. And now if I grew one atom, so it was the dome of the Vatican, which, like, you're about that big in the dome of the Vatican. It's about 42-meter diameter. It's huge, right? And you took the head of a pin. The head of the pin in the middle of the dome of the Vatican, if the electron cloud of the atom was dome of the Vatican, then the head of the pin would be the nucleus of that atom. It would be the proton in the middle. And so if I took a little Planck entity, which has a radius or a diameter of 10 to the 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, right? That's a period with 33 zeros, right? If I took that little Planck entity and I made it so it would be a grain of sand, okay, then how big would be the proton? The proton would have a diameter from the Sun to Alpha Centauri, which is about 40 trillion kilometers. Okay? That's how big the proton would become if the Planck was grown to the size of the Planck scale would be grown to the size of a grain of sand. So you can imagine the Planck is really, 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 really small. And the Planck oscillating field is oscillating at really, 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 really high frequency. And so, of course, you don't experience it directly, or maybe you are when you're doing healing, when you're interacting with it. Maybe even your consciousness is interacting. Maybe your consciousness is an interaction of the biology with that field. And this is actually what we wrote in this latest paper we published. We are saying basically that the body is like an antenna. So instead of thinking of the body producing the consciousness, producing awareness, self-awareness, imagine the body interacting with the field of information, with the field of energy. So these Planck oscillators can be considered as little bits of information. Think of it as little pixels. In fact, they would be voxels because they would have a volume, right? But think of them as little voxels in the structure of space carrying information. Just like bits of information on a hard disk in your computer. And you can think of it as, these bits of information interacting together to produce the material world. So my equations show that, and they're very precise, that actually if you count the number of bits of information inside the proton, and there's a lot of them, when you count the number of Plancks inside the proton, and each Planck is a little oscillator, so it has a little mass. When you calculate the mass of all the little Plancks inside the proton, you get the exact mass of the universe. So you get the mass of all the other protons, because the universe is pretty well the mass of the protons. You get the mass of all the other protons in the universe, or all the information of all the other protons in the universe in one specific proton. And then you calculate the amount of little Plancks on the surface of the proton. So now imagine you got all the information of the universe inside, but you have a limited amount of information on the surface. So now you have entropy. Not all the information inside can express itself outside. So what I wanted to know is what's the ratio of this entropy? What is the energy of this entropy? So I did the ratio between the outside and the inside, and then I I multiplied it by the energy of 1 Planck to get the energy of the ratio, and it gives me the exact mass of the proton. And if I did it for a black hole in the universe, it'd give me the exact mass of the black hole. So all of a sudden, I could prove that mass, the mass of all the material world, is actually the result of the little Planck's information network moving about. So that every Planck has all the information in the universe, and it's interacting, every proton, it has all the information in the universe, and it's interacting with all the other protons, okay? And this interaction, not being able to express itself fully because it's limited by the amount of Planck on the surface, this entropy is what we call mass. And using that, I was able to extrapolate exactly what should be the radius, the exact radius of the proton, and I published that as a prediction. And then a few months later, unknown to me, they were trying to measure the radius of the proton more precisely than ever before, and when they measured it, it came out 4% smaller than the standard model expected, and that was the prediction I had made. So it actually was, you know, exact, or very, very close to exact. I'm inside the margin of error of the experiment, so my prediction could be exact and the experiment's getting close to it. But the mainstream is 4% off. Now, why is this all important? Well, think about it this way. The little proton, and there's other physicists, some very famous one like Sutskin at the Stanford physics department, that are coming to conclusion that particles are entangled not because of some quantum weirdness, but because there is little hairs, little what is called wormholes that connect them. And through these wormholes, so you can imagine a little wormhole, and at the end of the wormhole, the connection is a Planck. So all the Planck surface that I counted that allows the information to move is actually the entrance of one little wormhole that's connecting to another proton. And we know there's about 10 to the 80th protons in the universe. And when I counted the number of connection of the little wormholes on the surface, there was 10 to the 40th on the surface. So that means that one proton can only connect to 10 to the 40th, which is a lot still, other protons, right, in the universe. But then these 10 to the 40th are connected through another 10 to the 40th, and that's what makes up the 10 to the 80th protons. And that is all of a sudden a network that is looking quite different than the idea that every particle is somehow isolated from all the other particles in the universe. In fact, this is showing that all particles and all black holes in the universe are connected through these wormholes, because of course particles fall into black holes, and so they create these connections, right? Even two particles that are entangled falling into black holes make the two black holes connected. And so you can imagine there's a lot of these connections that connect everything. And if you think about all this, then you start to realize, oh, maybe everything is entangled, right? We measure in laboratory that two particles can be entangled at instantaneous speed, meaning it doesn't matter how far they are from each other. When we measure them in laboratory, if we move one, if we change the angle of one, the other one changes instantaneously, no matter how far. Even if at the speed of light, the information wouldn't have time to get to the other one, we're not able at this point to be able to to measure any delay. So we know that particles can be entangled, but we think that some particles are entangled, but not all particles are entangled. But that's because we can measure particles that are entangled when we entangled them ourselves in a laboratory. There's a certain way that we can entangle particles in laboratory, and then we find they're entangled. But what if they're entangled naturally to particles that we don't have access to? So of course, then we wouldn't be able to measure the change that happens when we change the angle of one particle over here, because the other one is not in our laboratory. It might be on the other side of the universe. But it's changing instantaneously relative to the one we have. But we can't measure it, so we don't know. And that's why we think that things are separated. But they're not. And these equations I just wrote, which are extremely precise, I mean, they predict extremely precisely. Now imagine an equation that has the mass of the universe in it. And at the end of the calculation, the numbers, huge numbers, like the mass of the universe, output exactly, very, very precisely the mass of one proton in the universe. Okay? So this is remarkable. It's remarkable that it even comes out right, you know. And it can't be, you know, by chance that happened. It's significant. And so this tells you what? Why am I telling you all about this? Well, because if you understand these mechanisms, then you can be much more effective in influencing changes. If you understand that everything is connected through this network, that you're part of this network, that your client is part of this network, whoever you're working on is part of this network, and you understand how this network functions, then you can be what I call a vacuum engineer. You can be effective at modifying the information in the field so that you can affect change. And this all of a sudden opens the door to understanding all these, you know, what the mainstream think as these bizarre, you know, remote healing, faith healing, all these bizarre, like, miracles type of thing that happen where somebody can help heal somebody else even at a distance, or even remote viewing, which was actually confirmed in the laboratory in the 70s from some of the physicists that I actually wrote papers with, and that have published the result of remote viewing experiments that were done in laboratory that showed non-trivial statistical evidence that, you know, it could be done and very effectively. And that was published in such famous journals as Nature and others, the journals that are extremely serious, that are the most respected physics journals in the world. And so, you know, how can somebody remote view a place that they've never been to? You know, maybe they're in the US and they're remote viewing a military base in Russia, which is what they used it for in the 70s, and so on. How are they doing this? Well, if all the information of all particles in the universe are networked to every particle, and you're made out of those particles, that means that within you, within all the particles that you're made of, is the information of everything you want to access in the universe. Now, are you going to access it on a daily basis and easily? Probably not, because first of all, you have to know that it's there and that you have access to it, right? It's not a given that you know that it's there and that you have access to it. But then when you know that it's there and you start to become aware that you have access to it, then you have to be able to actually translate the information. You have to be able to interact with this field of oscillation at a certain pace, at a certain rate that you can get the information out. Most of the masters that have walked the earth in history have told us that the way to, the universe, the way to nirvana, the way to God is within us, to go inside to get the information. Well, they weren't kidding. The information is there. And, and so from there, you can have access and you can modify the information in the field. So you can modify a particle in another person's body by putting a certain set of information in the field from your body, from your particles, and entangling them or transferring the information through the entanglement that's already there. So, it's a question of resonance match, it's a question of being the right state, and there can be technologies that can help us to do that. So it really is exciting, and it really is changing the view that we have of the world, the material that makes up our reality and our place in it. So now that we have a better scientific understanding of what's going on and the changes that are occurring in theories, in quantum physics and in quantum mechanics, but as well in relativity, because these theories actually unify the two. Now, how do we access this? How do we get it better capacity to interact with this field now that we know it's there? Well, again, if you are aware that this field is there and you know that it's making up all of the atoms that makes up your reality, and when I mean all the atoms, I mean all the atoms, not just the proton in the nuclei of the atom. We have now, and this is in peer review right now, but we have extended the holographic mass solution, is how we call it, to this volume to surface ratio of Planck's. We've extended it to the electron clouds of the Bohr atom, and it outputs very, very precisely with high level of precision. In fact, in some instance, with 1 order of magnitude more precise than the standard model, and with no free parameters, which the standard model could not claim, it outputs very precisely the mass of the electron and the mass of all of the electrons in the table of elements. So all the elements of our reality that we see come out of the theory very, very clean all the way through the whole table of elements. So for the mass of all the elements. So and that is the mass of the protons and the electrons. There is neutrons in there, but now think of neutrons as protons in disguise, of course, because if you knock an electron out of the if you knock a neutron out of the nuclei, it becomes a proton very, very quickly. So a neutron is really just a state of charge when the little particles are in the nuclei orbiting. So they're protons as well. So basically, we've outputted all of the material world out of this understanding that there's a field that connects everything and that makes up all of the material world. And so when we understand that, so that everything in your body really is part of that field, you can think of your body as like a region of that field of information that's organized in a certain set of information. When you realize that, then you realize that I can change the set of information in my body, in my field, in the field of my body, by concentrating on it, by sending certain sets of information through it, certain intent even through it, certain state of emotions. So for me, you know, it started when I was 11, for instance. I learned very early on that meditation was important from a very young master in India. And he taught me how to meditate. I wasn't in India, but he came into the region where I lived, and he was, I think, 16 or 15 at the time, and he taught me how to meditate. And this was a way for me, so these techniques are ways for us to actually go inward instead of outward. Now, our senses and the way we're brought up in the world, typically, we pay a lot of attention to what's outside of us. And we think that our impact is limited to what we can reach, what we can see, what we can feel, what we can smell, right? But actually, when you go inside, then that's when you actually reach a much larger field of influence. Because you're going inside your own set of information, which makes up these atoms that you're made of. And these are entangled with atoms all around the universe. And so you have access to this information, and you can influence it. So when a practical way is to actually spend, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, to explore your inner self instead of exploring the outside world. Because in there is a whole universe of information. So you could think of yourself as like a cosmonaut going into your inner space and exploring a space that, you know, has not been explored very much by very many people. And so when you do that, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, you will find a deeper and deeper and easier way to get in and to open that door, to unlock this information, and you will find that you have more and more of an influence. For instance, if you're a healer, you might find that you are getting better and better at getting results from your healing practices, whatever modality you're using. If you are trying to understand certain things, if you're trying to have a deeper theoretical concept about something and so on, you might find that more time you spend in your inner space, easier those answers come to you. So there is great value in actually becoming an inner space cosmonaut, and actually, you know, discovering the boundaries and transgressing the boundaries of your physical self, and getting into this information field which has boundless amount of information. This potential is really transformative. These theories, these new theories that are being written by me and others, is really changing the way we see the universe and how the universe is unified, and that the very large and the very small actually function under the same dynamics of this fundamental field that connects everything. Of course, with any new theoretical constructs, especially if they're true and they're fundamental, then new technologies emerges. And these technologies are significant. It is clear that if we understand how this field functions and how it is, you know, creating reality all around us, all the material world, then we can go in laboratory and reproduce these dynamics in the laboratory to do all sorts of things that we would think as impossible today, things that we would think of as miraculous today. Like, for instance, if we know that matter is created out of that field and we reproduce these dynamics in the field artificially, we should be able to eventually make matter or extract matter directly out of the vacuum fluctuations. We already, with the dynamical Casimir effect, are able to extract photons out of the field, out of the vacuum structure. So, and as we understand the dynamics of the vacuum structure, we can now start to think about producing matter out of what we thought of in the past as empty space. Of course, if we're producing mass, that means we can actually produce gravitational field. That means we have gravity control, meaning we can produce gravitational field that accelerates us in any direction, for instance, towards the sun or towards the center of the galaxy or whatever. You know, space travel becomes very accessible. All of a sudden, you don't have to have thousands and thousands of tons of fuel in some rocket, and you know, to be able to reach low orbits, you know, not very far. All of a sudden, with gravitational control, you can birth a whole civilization into space travel. You can actually live in space on very, very, very large structures. I mean, the size of the structure doesn't matter anymore. If you have control over gravity, you can make ships the size of planets. And so on, and then when you come onto the Earth, then the Earth is just a garden. This is the place you come down to enjoy. Why would we want to do that? It is actually critical for humanity at this time that we literally learn to fly, that we learn to control gravitational field, and that we birth our civilization into a space colony, because planetary systems are not stable. It's remarkable we're still here to talk about it. Planets eventually get disturbed by asteroids crashing into them, or comets coming a little too close, or comets literally crashing into planets. We've seen that already. We saw in the 90s, you know, a comet hit Jupiter, leaving holes on the surface of Jupiter the size of the Earth almost. We've seen comets hit the sun continuously, multiple times every month. We've seen, you know, and so the fact that we're still here, one sun flare in our direction, a good enough sun flare in our direction could just wipe out the atmosphere and all of our protective layers, such as the ozone layers and so on, and leave us very quickly as a completely dead planet, something that would resemble Mars. So the fact that we're still here is amazing, and I think we're living in grace, literally, but I think we shouldn't push it. The Earth is like the nest of a bird. It's a beautiful, warm, cozy place to be when the birds are small, but when there's too many of them and they're getting too big, the birds must learn how to fly. Otherwise, the next wind is going to come by and knock the nest out of the tree, and then the birds, if they can't fly, they won't do so good. So it's the same thing for us. We're at this point in our history where we must make this transition. Our society and all the technology we have today is the result of us learning about electromagnetic fields, developing the correct theories, and then applying these theories to technology to actually produce all of the technology we see is the result of controls of electromagnetic field. Now is the next step is to learn to control gravitational field. And we're learning very quickly in our laboratories and in laboratories around the world. New technologies are about to emerge that will give us this capacity with these new theories. As well, the extraction of an almost infinite amount of energy is available from this field, freeing humanity from having to burn fossil fuel to produce power, and so on. So it's completely going to change our world. And it's totally changing the way we think of healthcare as well. Because if biology and all the cellular activity that are going on in highly complex systems like a human being or plant and so on, if all this is the result of information interaction in the field, and then when those are electromagnetic interaction, and we learn how to control these information sets, that means that we can reestablish coherency, we can reestablish proper communication links when the links or when there's damage to the coherency. And I think that a lot of what healers do and so on in the alternative medicine is a way to do that, but we can now, with a good understanding of what is actually going on, we can as well develop technologies like we are doing at the lab here, some of it that we will be releasing very soon, that will create coherency in its region of space, that will create higher level of interaction and information transfer so that there's high level of coherency in the crystalline structure of the biology to produce very high energy states, very coherent structures, and have significant health effects. So imagine a world in the future in which life is lived on multiple planets, maybe in multiple solar systems, maybe in multiple places around the world, around the galaxy, where we have contacts with, maybe with other civilizations that are out there. We know now that almost every star in our galaxy has planets around them. And we know as well that the amount of planets that are far enough from their star and close enough to get enough heat, like it's called the Golden Law region, in the region where liquid water can exist on the planet and all this, and life can emerge there, life as we know it at least, we know that there's billions of those planets inside our galaxy alone. The last estimate was 40 billion. And so there's probably a lot of life out there to discover and to interact with. And some of that life might be much more advanced than us, much more. Because we only have 150 to 200 years of technical development on this planet, technological development on this planet. So imagine a society that has millions of years on us. Imagine what their computer looks like. Imagine what their cell phone looks like. It's something completely different than what you're experiencing today. So imagine what we could learn. But certainly, the future of healthcare is most likely, if these theories are correct, and they appear to be, is most likely going to be something in which we are actually modifying the field interaction with the biology to produce the desired effect. So that if there's a breakdown in communication between cells, for instance, such as cancer cells, we can reestablish the appropriate coherent information links so that everything goes back to normal. You can imagine all kinds of disease being able to be treated that way. In fact, pretty well any disease could be treated that way, because if we succeed at this, we will have the fundamental link that makes the body what it is, that makes the coherency what it is. And so we can reestablish health in any case. Now imagine as well that if the body is literally living off this field, and just as a side tangent, it's been shown, and I was able personally to do the same, that someone can actually stop eating and live off that field. I did that for 3 years. I was a breatharian for 3 years. We're doing calculations right now showing that actually the body burns way more energy than what you're taking in when you're eating, so that you're already extracting energy from some source, most likely that field. And so basically, imagine that you are able to control this field of information, and you have a chamber, for instance, in which it basically regenerates everything in your body periodically, maybe every 10, 15 years. You could live for thousands of years. So life extension, we've been shown in laboratory, we have shown in laboratory already that cells have no reason to die. Meaning, if you give a cell all of the nutrients it needs and it's able to get rid of all its waste, it keeps on ticking. We've had cells in laboratories that have been there for some 40 years, not in my laboratory, in mainstream laboratory, showing that, and that are still alive, just because they are being given the appropriate nutrients and the waste is being removed efficiently. So basically, you can think of the future healthcare facilities as chambers in which you would enter and be exposed to very highly coherent fields of information that reprograms your body back into coherency, so that there is no, so that you overcome the entropy of the body breaking down and changing state. So, life extension is another very amazing product of this huge change that's occurring in our understanding of the physics of the universe, the material world that's around us, and ourself interacting with it. Of course, all these fantastic possibilities that are emerging from these new theoretical models is going to take a little bit of time to be implemented. But some of it will be implemented in our lifetime. I believe actually that energy production and gravitational control will occur in our lifetime, in the next decade. We will have these technologies, and our capacity to use them as well for health and life extension is going to happen very quickly. And there is a resistance to the change. Of course, we have been thinking a certain way for so long. It is difficult for a large percentage of the population to just start thinking a different way. This is why we need everybody, everyone that gets this, to participate and help out. And that's why you're students of Quantum University or students of the Resonance Academy, where at the Resonance Science Foundation we have a course where you can learn about this and understand it better and discuss it with people all around the world and so on. So this is really, where the rubber meets the road. We need your help. We need your support financially. We need your support in your capacity to talk about it and propagate the information. And we need your support in the field. We need, everybody that we can muster in the field, influencing the field, so that the main percentage of the population eventually gets it easier, because the information is already being propagating in the field. So this is some of the stuff we are doing here. That is some of the stuff you're learning at Quantum University and at the Resonance Academy. Participate, talk with your friends, with your family, stay involved, and we'll see you in the vacuum.
Quantum University is the world's largest institution of higher learning to provide online degrees and certification programs in holistic, alternative, natural, and integrative medicine based on the science of quantum physics. The International Quantum University for Integrative Medicine, IQUIM, also known as Quantum University, is an online degree-granting institution located in the state of Hawaii in downtown Honolulu. Students can earn bachelor's, master's, doctorate and PhD degrees, leading to professional board certifications. Quantum University's mission is to build a new future for medicine, one student at a time. Graduates of Quantum University take their health and wellness career to the next level and follow their dreams to start a new, exciting, successful and meaningful career in integrative medicine.